Hello, and welcome to another episode of The Clever Clarinetist. I'm your host, Dr. Larkin Sanders. Today's video is going to be a full tutorial of the fourth cycle of the Missouri All-State Audition music for soprano clarinet. Super exciting stuff, so this is the last video I have to make. I believe I have covered the other three cycles. You can find all of those on my channel. If you're looking for cycles 1, 2, or 3, go check out my channel and you will find them there. So the way this kind of works is that I will have a split screen in just a moment where you will see me marking up the music on one side and you hear me talking on the other. And we're just gonna go through all the music and talk about what's important about it, what you don't wanna miss, what you definitely wanna get, and absolutely what the judges are listening for. So pay attention, stick with me. I promise it'll be worth it in the end. This will be like the biggest lesson you need in the Missouri All-State music. Okay, so as you can see on the half of the screen with the sheet music, I have all of the sets listed out in front of me. This is just a basic sheet that the state of Missouri gives, and we have set 4 circled in blue, so you'll see blue brackets and blue circles around the selections in this compilation that we're going to be working with. If you want to download my packet, it doesn't have the markings in it. You have to make your own markings, but you can download this packet on my website in the free stuff section. So let's just jump right into these 32 etudes. We got to scroll past all the closé and the scales. All right, number 17 in the Rose 32 etudes is probably my favorite etude in this whole book, and maybe of all time. I think there's a lot of emotional depth to it, and it's really beautiful, and it's just a pleasure to play. I play it anytime I get the opportunity to play solo music in a church or something where we're looking for something meditative, but something I can do unaccompanied and kind of on the fly. So if you enjoy this etude, hang on to it. You will definitely come back to it time and time again. So the first thing we notice is that this etude is marked Adagio cantabile. What does Adagio cantabile mean? It means very slowly in a singing style. I'm just throwing my pencil around. So Adagio, slow in a singing style. So that should kind of set the mood for what you're trying to accomplish throughout this etude. You don't ever want to push it forward. If anything, you want the pulse to stay on the back end of things. It should be very meditative, very slow and beautiful. So in order to accomplish this, I recommend subdividing in eighth notes throughout the whole piece. When you're practicing it with your metronome, use an eighth note pulse. In fact, the eighth note pulse I like to use is eighth note equals 100, which is, if you do the math right, it's 50 beats per minute in quarter notes. But it's my personal philosophy that the human brain cannot really even comprehend tempos slower than 60 beats per minute. I think we're just wired that way. That's why we chose it as the second. So if you're going to pick a tempo slower than that, I think you must have subdivisions on, or be really good at subdividing in your own brain. So sometimes you might find yourself going in and out of time. It's okay, but be conscious of it and do what you need to do to fix it. So something I like to do to avoid that, or if I catch myself doing it, is draw tick marks to show, kind of give my eyeball a place to go. If you've watched any of my other All-State tutorials, you know that this is something I really like. So on this first dotted quarter note D, it would get 3 little tick marks because there are 3 eighth notes in a dotted quarter note. Remember, there are 2 eighth notes in a single quarter note, and with the dot, that adds a half of the quarter note's value, so it'll be 3 eighth notes. So you see 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Yeah, I do count this in 8, but you can also think of it as 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 3, etc. So that should help you kind of keep track of where you are. I'm not saying you have to draw hashes all over your music, just in the places where you catch yourself getting off, or if you feel yourself wanting to turn those eighth notes into 16th notes or whatever, give yourself something to look at, something to root down to. All right, and then we have this little section of 30-second notes that looks kind of scary, but remember that when we're subdividing, they just turn into 16th notes. So there'll be 4 30-second notes for every 8th note. Da dee 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 da 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 da. And if you take some good time, like put a little emphasis on the F and D, it'll make it easier to go da dee 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 dee. And you'll notice in my performance video, I take a little bit of time going from the F to the D because it's kind of a hard interval to make. And I think it's okay as long as you don't lose your pulse. The thing about rubato and taking time is that you must continue to have your pulse. You can't just like lose track of time all of a sudden. So as long as you're maintaining your pulse, taking a little bit of time is okay there. Giving myself some extra tick marks there so you can kind of see how this adds up. So this is also a way to check your math. So you can see 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 tick marks in that last measure. So I did do my math right. All right. So what's going on next? The next thing you need to look out for is this 16th note rest. Da 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 dee dum. Da 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 da. So that 16th note F will feel kind of like an and or like an 8th note as you would typically count. Watch out for that. And make sure that you're holding your long notes for their full duration. Nothing gets my goat as a judge quite like when people who are taking the audition don't hold long notes for the full value. It's like the easiest thing you can do is make sure you're holding long notes, the full value. So don't skip them. Make sure you're holding on to them and you're counting through them. And the F sharp will trill to a G, so you'll go F sharp to G. All right. And these dotted 8th notes aren't going to feel that fast. Remember, you can always subdivide things with dots down to a smaller value. So a dotted 8th note is the same value as 3 16th notes. So you could think like that. Da 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 dum. Dee dee dee. There, and then you can see the longer tick marks are the 8th notes and the shorter tick marks are the 16th notes. That's another way I like to help track subdivisions. Da da dum dee. Again, don't panic just because you're seeing 30-second notes. Remember that there are 4 30-second notes for every 8th note. Let's see if I got my math right. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Sure did. Watch out for these B flats. Otherwise, these are C major scales. They just have these extra little B flats. So you might make a note. C major plus B flat. That would help me. If it doesn't help you, don't worry about it. And then we have this like little mini cadenza. And in theory, it's tied, but I think it's okay to break the tie to take a breath if you need it. I think in my performance video, I did take a breath. So obviously I endorse that. And remember that this is just a chromatic scale. Don't panic. But you do want to make sure you land on this D. You might hold on to that C sharp just a little bit to root your time and make sure that you land on that D comfortably and that you don't just like keep going up or don't go up high enough. And that D flat's the same note as C sharp, right? And we're finishing our cadence here. We have our first perfect authentic cadence. Well, I guess in the key of 5 and F. Never mind, don't listen to me, it's fine. All right, then we have another phrase. Watch out for this. A lot of people miss this E flat, even though it's in the key signature. So make sure you're playing E flat there. It's gonna sound like E natural kind of works, but it definitely does not. So if you feel like you're gonna miss any of the E flats throughout, make sure you give them a little mark wherever you need them. You don't have to mark all of them, just the ones that you feel like you're going to miss. And at the end of this measure down here, the third line, last measure, watch out for this dotted 16th note, 32nd note combination. It's not too bad. Da dee 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 da dum da da dum da dum. So you still have to fit all of those notes in 1 8th note. Da 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 da. Sorry, 2 8th notes. There we go. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6, and 7, and 8. A 1. Yeah? Oh, it's not a trill. Why did I think it was a trill? It doesn't matter. But that's how you fit that in the rhythm. Da-da-dum, ba-dum. And then we have some good little scales. We just have a basic 16th note scale there. But here in the second measure, watch out, it doesn't have the little threes under them, but they are triplets. So if you need to make a note that all these 16th notes here are triplets, then do so. Watch out for E flats. And something that really bothers me in French writing is when we have staccatos under slurs. That just means legato articulation. I kind of like a little space in these little scaly scales, but what's most important is the rhythm and that you're just getting the articulation at all. You don't have to put it doesn't have to be bouncy, just make sure they're articulated and you're doing the articulations correctly. And make sure you hold out this C enough. Did I do that right? 1, 2, no, that's not right. Da, 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 da. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Da, 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 da. Yeah. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. There we go. So you're going to feel 2 clicks in that dotted 8th rest before you come back in on that 16th note. All right, watch out for A flat. It's the same fingering as G sharp. All right, and here we have a good old-fashioned E flat to C combination. Whenever we have this combination, we have to use our alternate pinky keys. So that means you're going to have to play C on the left because E flat is always on the right. And I let myself know that by drawing R's and L's in my music. Right, R for right, L for left, so make sure you're paying attention to that. Anytime you have E flat to C or C straight to E flat, you have to use the left hand C. Sorry, but yes, judges can in fact hear you slopping it up, sliding around on your pinky keys, so please, please, please use the correct pinky keys. All right, moving on. We have these 16th notes, it's just a B flat major scale, and then we have this fun trill, E flat to F. Kind of gnarly, but what you can do to trill from E flat to F is just pick up your middle 2 fingers, so keep your pinky down and your first finger down and just trill these 2 fingers to go from E flat to F. That'll make your life a little bit easier, I hope. All right, we do have a 1-in-1 fingering that you could in theory use for this B flat here. But I know it's not as resonant of a fingering on my clarinet as like using the side key or the sliver key. So I really recommend using your side key on the B flat there, just so that you're still getting a beautiful sound because it's not fast enough to really warrant an alternate fingering like that. We have the nice 8th notes. Then we have a really dramatic moment. It says poco forte, but I think of it as more like a subito forte. Like we have this piano, we do a little decrescendo to this B flat, take a big breath, and all of a sudden we're forte. Then we have a turn, which go listen to my performance to hear what exactly that sounds like. Dum dee da 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 dee 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 dee. You're gonna go C, D, C, B natural, C, then that last C that I sung is the next 16th note. Dum dee 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 do. Yeah, and you have a ritardando, which means you can slow this down. Larghe just means long. It's not large, it's larghe, so you can just really stretch it out there. Dum dee 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 dee. And then you have this nice fermato over the rest too, so you can really like take a breath. You can breathe out. You can get a couple of breaths in there before going on, if in your audition they make you do that. They probably won't, but just in case, it's good to know that you have plenty of time on this rest. Wait. Breathe. All right. And then we have an odd tempo. So back to the original tempo. Having a little journey into G minor for this section. It's kind of cool. And so these little 16th note triplets are marked. So there's going to be one triplet per 8th note, which is great. Makes it easy to count. And then you have to make sure you're making a big difference when you come back to the 16th notes. Yep. Yep. And then we have 8th note triplets, which if you're subdividing along are going to feel really funky. They're really going to feel like quarter note triplets. Watch out for this E flat up high, and make sure you're using the forked fingering for high E flat. Using the middle finger is not a real fingering. It's so flat, it's basically a quarter step flat. So you really need to make sure you're using the forked fingering for that high E flat. It's gonna feel weird, but it's a good chance to practice super dividing, really. If it's really getting you down, this is an instance where you can change the metronome over to 50 beats per minute and practice evenly spacing these 8th note triplets across the whole quarter note. Da 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 da. But you want to make sure that you're not turning it into like 2 dotted 8ths and a 16th note. Don't do that. That happens a lot when we deal with triplets like this. So make sure you're not doing that. Don't do it. All right, and watch out for your flats. This is a G harmonic minor scale. We know that because we have E flats, B flats, and F sharps coming down. And then we have these slick arpeggios. They say 6, but you can really think of them as 4 sets of triplets. Whoop, that's a number 4. Da 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 da. Yeah. They're really not so bad. Just because the numbers changed from 3 to 6 doesn't change the rhythm. And yeah, then the triplets keep going. Da 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 da. I'm drawing little red lines just in between the triplets instead of redrawing the brackets. I'm not going to draw little 3s for every single group of 16th notes here, but this is a chromatic scale. Just drawing crazy lines. I forgot to mention that these arpeggios this is a G minor if you're theoretically inclined and you like to know that kind of stuff, and this is what are you? Probably an F sharp diminished or a D7 with an E flat. It's fine. No, it's totally an F sharp diminished. And then you have a chromatic scale coming down, chromatic until you get here. And then that is just a little scale. You still have B flat. Da 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 da, but make sure you're catching that when you get to that D, that you're not just playing a chromatic scale all the way down to F sharp. You're stopping on D and continuing down in a stepwise scale. It's also important that you don't rush through the chromatic scale. Like, just because it's a chromatic scale and you know it really well doesn't mean you need to just plow through it. So make sure you are playing every single note in exactly the right time. And then you have this nice ritardando here. Dum 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 dum. Then you have a trill. This will be a G to A. Trill. And this little grace note will take you out of it. And I think I like to keep that 8th note fermata pretty brief. And then you have some good time to breathe here, which is great. Yep, make sure you're holding on to this D for enough time. And then on the 5th, 8th note of the bar, you'll land on the tied D. So make sure you're staying within time and not playing it too slow or too fast. Yeah? It's really easy to lose track of reality in something like this. So make sure you're checking your work and checking your counting so that everything is exactly right. Because the most important part of an audition is great rhythm. All right, and then these are all nice and march. Triplet, 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 triplet. Dum, da, dee, 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 All right, and something important to know is you really take a big honking breath here. Because you're not going to have time to take one at the end. No, do not do it over the bar line, and do not do it between the last 2 notes. Just don't breathe in the last 3 measures, truly. I believe in you. I believe you can make it all the way to the end. So those are the important things I have for number 17. If you need to take a screenshot, or whatever, please feel free to do so. You're welcome to copy my notes and directly into whatever you're using for your audition. But make sure you're catching all the little details of this etude. That is the main challenge of it, is making sure you're paying attention to the rhythms, you're subdividing, and making some beautiful music out of it. All right, so let's move on to the fast etude, which is a little bit more straightforward, but it is very tricky in its own way. Allegro furioso. So it's funny, the word allegro in Italian relates to happiness. So furiously happy is what this etude is marked. But we think of allegro in music as fast. So we're calling this etude fast and furious. Ha ha ha. Enjoy. All right. So we're in the key of C minor, not E flat major, C minor. So if you are practicing along with your scales and you need a little refresher between number 17 and this one, or vice versa, you can always play the scales in the key that the piece is in. Number 17 is in B flat major, by the way. Has some moments in G minor, but for the most part, it's in B flat major. This etude is in C minor. We know it's in C minor because it has 3 flats. It starts on C and it ends on C. And in the middle, at the end of the bracket, it's also a C. So we know all the cadential points end in C. Therefore, it is in C. All right, so first and foremost, there are a lot of articulations written in this etude. Make sure that you're practicing legato articulations at every speed that you're practicing. It is a philosophy of mine that there's only one true articulation style in clarinet playing, and it is legato. So that is to say, even if you're playing it slowly, you'll want to not clip these staccatos very short. Don't clip them at all, really. You just want to make sure you're articulating that you're putting your tongue on the reed in time for the note to start, but that you're not clipping it. Da 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 da. Just play your articulations legato. I'm not saying slur everything. Continue to use your tongue, but keep it long. And this is because as you get faster, the likelihood of becoming tongue-tied increases if you are clipping the notes too short. If you're practicing legato, the faster you go, the shorter the notes will sound. So just try to trust the process. I know that is such a weird phrase these days, but make sure, just trust what you're doing is right and practice your legato articulation. You're also going to need to watch out for all the funny fingerings. So we have a lot of left hand C's, like this one right here. And that's because we're going to have to go C, C, B, C, E flat. It's this combination that makes us use the E flat, the left hand C key, so we can get up to that right hand E flat. Yes, again, Judges can hear you slide. It sounds sloppy, so don't do it. Just do the correct fingerings. It's good for you. And we have some sweet arpeggios, so make sure you're playing with a forked fingering here and that you're getting all the way up to E flat. And then you're catching all these little accidentals along the way. So there's a B natural here, but then there's an E flat really quickly out of the gate. I know for me, the accidental I miss the most in this etude are A flats, so keep a special eye out for A flat. And here in this measure, we have a whole bunch of side keys. This is like side key central. So we're going from an F to an F sharp, and you're gonna want to use your side key to your bottom two trill keys to play that F sharp. So make sure you're using your chromatic side fingering for F sharp, both times it happens. And you're gonna have to use your bottom one side trill key for E flat, because you're going from E flat to C. So you can't use the forked finger. You can't use your little sliver banana key for that note. You have to use the side key for the E flats and the F sharp. So look at all those side keys. There are 4 side key maneuvers in that one measure alone. And when you finish that measure and you land on B natural, you have to land on the forked fingering because of this A sharp. A sharp is the same pitch as B flat. So if you missed that, make sure you marked it and you're not playing something like G sharp instead. That's really the tricky thing about this etude, is catching all these silly little accidentals. I like using a right hand B here. I think it makes me a little bit more efficient, but it really doesn't matter. You can use either pinky key. What else? We have some G major arpeggios coming down. Mark that. And then we have a very similar measure to these two measures. We have one that starts on C and one that starts on B. And that's a real mind game for sure. So you're gonna watch out for this E flat here. And make sure you're still doing legato articulations and catching all these weird notes. And then we have some really cool arpeggios, starting with an E diminished arpeggio. You can do right hand D flat for maximum efficiency. This F minor chord, you want to make sure you're catching the A flats. And then we have a B diminished chord, so make sure again that you're catching A flats. And you can do right hand B here, which again I like for maximum efficiency, but then you have an old E flat to C combination, which means you're gonna have to do E flat on the right hand because that's the only side you can do E flat on is on the right hand. And then C you have to do on the left. And then we have a chromatic scale. But then this G repeats itself. So watch out for that. G, G, F sharp. And this F is sharp still because the last F we saw was sharp. And then we have a not chromatic moment to take us up into that G. And when I was practicing it, I accidentally played a full chromatic scale in sextuplets, and it was pretty cool actually. I was kind of bummed that it wasn't the real thing. Oh well. And then typically they don't have you play the repeat in the audition. But don't quote me on that. There's always a chance they'll be like, but you have to do the repeat. So practice it every once in a while with the repeat, but you probably won't have to do it. Then you have a nice moment to breathe and keep going. I guess I should tell you where to breathe and the rest of it. So make sure you're breathing after this B. You can shorten that. Give yourself a nice breath there. And then if you really need it, you can also breathe here. I normally don't like breaking up big intervals like that, but it's the only place musically that makes any sense at all to breathe. And you want to use musical breathing to your advantage. Find a place where breathing makes sense to the listener. All right, back to business. We have this B diminished arpeggio or broken chord into a chromatic scale. Again, like number 17, make sure you're not just flying through the chromatic scale. Make sure you're playing it like in time. Even if you can play the chromatic scale way faster, that's not an excuse to leave your time behind. And then you have C minor arpeggios. So that's lots of chances to use your right, left pinky combinations. You're gonna have to use that left hand C a bunch. When you get to this one, it doesn't really matter. You can do left or right, but you'll probably end up wanting to do left just for the sake of consistency. And then we have these cool Alberti moments where it's basically a C drone with some moving notes underneath. And watch out for your A flats. You don't want to miss those. And B natural. And then F sharp. And then otherwise you also have a G natural. And then you have this G grace note. And it lands on the beat of the next measure. It's not a pickup grace note. It's D-ya, D-ya. It's great. Super fun. No, wait, no, it's not. It does come before the beat. B-ya-da-da-da-da-da-da-da. Anyway, we have another C drone here. It's just an octave higher. It's essentially the same thing as we had over here. It's very similar, minus this G here. So you want to watch out for A flat, B natural, A flat again, and F sharp down here. And then we have something a little bit different. Start to feel like Bach, I feel like, in this measure. It reminds me of the toccata and fugue a little bit, just not on the right key. We have E flat, D, C, and then you can do C in the right hand here. And B in the right hand. I actually recommend doing it that way, again, for maximum efficiencies, and you're only moving the right hand. You're not having to move your left hand in this mess of notes. Watch out for E flat again. All right, and then you land here, and if you can make it through this whole thing in one breath, kudos to you, and you should try. Otherwise, you're probably going to be dying about now. So you can take a breath between these two C's. Again, I don't like breaking up large intervals, but this is the only place that musically it makes sense to take a breath. And you're going to want to watch out for this left-hand C here. It's a left-hand C, not because there's an E flat coming up, but because of this A flat. And A flats also can only be played, that A flat can only be played on the left hand. Actually, there is a trick fingering for A flat that we're going to use in the broken chord exercise later in close A, but this is not a good place for it because the A flat is a really important note in the key. So we're going to keep it with our normal fingering. And the next exercise you would have to slide if you didn't use this trick fingering, so this is a little bit different. And watch out for this B natural again. And we have a left and right combination for C to E flat. And then we end. If you're interested in learning the whole etude, I recommend it. It's a great etude, but for the purposes of the All-State audition, we're going to stop there because that is the cut for the All-State audition. All right, let's go hit up some close A. Oh, too far. I went too far. Okay, so there we are. There are my blue brackets. We have to do B major thirds this year. What fun! B major is such a terrible key on the clarinet, but it is definitely, we have to get used to all the keys because we play like the most acrobatic instrument in the orchestra. So playing exercises like this are super important. So in the key of B major, we have 5 sharps. So make sure you're keeping track of that. It's going to be F sharp, C sharp, G sharp, D sharp, and A sharp. So if you need to mark those in, please do, especially because the accidentals in this will carry through the measure. They're not going to mark every single C sharp. They're not going to mark every single sharp at all, but make sure you're catching them. There's definitely some pinky acrobatics we have to do here. We have to use a certain combination of pinky keys to make it work. And because this is kind of a mess of notes, in order to pick out our pinky keys, we're going to find our D sharps and go ahead and mark them with an R. There they are, and maybe a little sharp sign too. All right, so that means the pinky keys around those D sharps are going to have to be on the left and alternating. So there's a C sharp here, and the B natural, and then this C sharp will be on the right hand side, and then that's an A sharp, which is below the break. And with this B, it doesn't matter to me which one you use. I would probably use my, what do? I use my right hand B there, but it really doesn't matter. And you want to make sure that you're differentiating between A sharp and G sharp. Make sure that you know the difference between those two pitches. It does happen a lot where people get those confused, so make sure you're catching that. All right, and on the way down, we also need to mark our pinkies. So we got our 2 D sharps, and we're going to work around that to get the correct pinkies. And again, I'm going to use right hand B because I like the efficiency of it. And then this last A sharp, please try to do a forked fingering so that it's easier, or I'm sorry, you're going to have to use the forked fingering on that B natural on the note you end on. So please use that. Please don't let the judges hear bleh, bleh when you flip-flop the fingers. Use your forked fingering. It's really important. All right, otherwise, what's going to be important for B major is catching all the accidentals and making sure you're using the correct pinky keys and that you're able to differentiate between all the accidentals. So make whatever marks you need to in your B major thirds to make yourself successful. All right, moving on, we have the arpeggios, and these arpeggios are a lovely break from all this B major stuff because they give us the easiest broken chords in the whole set of music. You can see my green writing where I did last year's chunk. But yeah, so we have C major to A minor to F major to D minor to B flat major, and last but not least, G minor to the end. The thing that I find tricky about this is knowing where the top notes repeat themselves and when they just turn around. So the top notes repeat themselves in almost every exercise. They repeat themselves in C major, in A minor, in D minor, and in B flat major, but they don't repeat themselves in F major or in G minor. It's probably because the height of those chords are so high, and it's just, this is kind of an old-fashioned etude. If you were playing broken chords in my scale book, you'd have to go all the way to the top. I'm going to get rid of those circles because it's just to demonstrate that some of these go up and back down and some of them pause at the top and come back down. Make sure you're doing the correct articulations, that you're articulating every first note of the groups of 4, ta-da-da-da, 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 ta, etc. And I like to take a little sip of a breath at the end of each line. I think, the gap is not ideal, but at the end of the day, you gotta breathe. And the only way you're gonna make it from C major all the way to the end in one breath is if you're playing these at like 144 beats per minute. And I know that's totally feasible for a professional clarinet player, but that might not be feasible for you as a high school student. So if you need to breathe at the end of every line, go for it. But the less you can breathe, the better. If you can only breathe after one line, that would be ideal. You can kind of hear an example of that in my performance. I tried to make sure there was a breath at the end of every line to be representative of what a high schooler might need to do. Just do your best. Another thing to remember is that in an arpeggio, in broken chords like these, there are only 3 notes or 3 pitch classes in every single one. So in C major, you're just going to have C, E, and G. In A minor, you're going to have A, C, and E. In F, you're going to have F, A, C. And in D minor, you're going to have D, F, A. I write in lowercase letters in minor and upper class and majors. It's just something I learned in school, but you can write it however you want. All right, and then B flat, you have B flat, D, and F. And in G minor, you have G, B flat, and D. Oh, yep. Lowercase, we just went over this. So if you're not playing one of those 3 notes in every group of these, there's something wrong. So that's a great way to check your work and make sure you're playing all the right notes. Otherwise, the fingerings are really standard. There are no weird pinky acrobatics. There's nothing weird you have to do in these arpeggios. Just use your regular fingerings that you have come to know and love, and don't try to do anything weird. All right, moving on to the various patterns of the tonic chord in all keys. What a beautiful, beautiful time, especially because we have to do this in B major. I do have a couple of trick fingerings for you. So first of all, this isn't exactly a trick, but remember that D sharp has to be played with the forked fingering, and that means you can just bounce down to the lower F sharp in the forked fingering, because F sharp and D sharp have the same fundamental, which is forked B natural. Yeah, clarinet physics. What a great time. But then you'll want to do your middle finger for this F sharp here. That's why it has a little M over it, because you have to jump down to a B with the left hand and your D sharp with the right hand. So you can see I definitely have already marked my D sharps in here with little R's, except that one that I just marked. I've already got my pinkies figured out, which is great. For this D sharp, these D sharps, you have to use the side key. You can't use your forked key or your sliver banana key in the left hand, because there would be too much sliding. So make sure you're using your side key for D sharps. On the way back up again, got to catch these D sharps. Make sure you are catching all your accidentals, because again, they carry through the measure and the octave in this exercise. So they're not going to restate the accidentals for you. Make sure you're catching them, and if you don't do it automatically, make sure you write them down. And then again, you're going to use the forked fingering for this F sharp so that you can get up to this high D sharp with your forked fingering. I wrote the letter B over this B here because I kept missing it. I kept seeing it as a G, and I think it's just because it's a big interval. So if you need the occasional reminder like that when you have a big interval what the notes are going to, that's okay. Especially if your success rate is low. If it helps you to have a higher success rate with a letter written in, go for it. And then you can stop after this G sharp and breathe and keep going. Because now we're going to do it in G sharp, which is the relative minor key of B major. Isn't that great? And this is where my fun trick fingering comes in. So for G sharp, in this pattern, you would either have to slide. You either have to slide from that G sharp to that B with your left pinky, just because of the amount of D sharps there are, and in relationship to the G sharps, which is awful. This is really hard, but it's kind of up to you. This is one where if you did slide, no one would really judge you for it. For this trick fingering for G sharp, it's when you're going from D sharp to G sharp and back to B. So after D sharp, G sharp is, we call it 2 + 2. So it's thumb and register 1 2 1 2. That is a trick finger for G sharp. It is not a pretty note. It's really yucky, actually. So don't judge it for its tone quality. That's not the goal here. We're trying to be acrobatic and tidy and clean with our fingers. I use this fingering in my video, and I'm sorry my music stand is in the way, but you can kind of hear the difference there a little bit, but otherwise all you hear is a clean arpeggio. So I recommend using that trick fingering 2 + 2 for that G sharp, and make sure you're using the correct pinky keys for the rest of it. So we have G sharps and D sharps throughout this G sharp minor exercise. And then you'll also want to use your 2 + 2 fingering here at the end when you're coming back up, going from B to G sharp. 2 + 2 up here on this G sharp. And again, you're going to have your right pinky to left pinky to 2 + 2. And don't forget, you still have to do your forked fingering. You always have to play D sharp forked. There's no way around it. You have one little G sharp, and I give myself the opportunity to land on this E. I think that's fine. I don't think any judge is going to be upset with you if you play that extra E at the end of that arpeggio. All right, we have made it through all the music for your Missouri All-State Audition on soprano clarinet. I hope this was really helpful. If you would like to take a private lesson with me, I am taking private students, or you can take a one-off lesson just to get yourself prepped and ready to go for your audition. You can book a lesson on my website, cleverclarinetist.com. Thanks so much for watching, and I look forward to working with you in the future.